I had the cops show up in my apartment once because of D&D, not because we were doing anything illegal, not because we were disturbing the peace in any meaningful way, but because my players wouldn't stop yelling, and because I, in a moment of what I thought was brilliant DMing, invented a 25-foot tall Storm Giant Librarian who threw massive tomes at people's heads for 5 to 50 points of damage to enforce silence. And because my paranoid neighbors thought we were, and I quote, the worst of the worst. We were just playing D&D, but apparently when you're in a college housing and your solution to a noise complaint is to threaten your players with imaginary violence from an invisible giant librarian, things can escalate. And they did. So let me explain. This was back in college. I was living in an apartment complex and they had made a deal with the school to house students. And based on what happened next, I'm pretty sure they were regretting the deal. But I didn't know that at the time. I only knew one thing. The last time we played D&D, we got a noise complaint. Now, if you've ever played D&D, you know things get loud. Someone lands a critical hit and everyone erupts. Someone rolls a 1 at the worst possible moment and everyone groans. Someone makes a terrible pun and everyone laughs or they throw dice at him. It's not malicious. It's not a party. It's just D&D. The game has volume. But we got in the complaint, and I did not want to get kicked out of my apartment for playing a tabletop game, so I had to do something. And what I did was probably not the solution a reasonable adult would have chosen. I invented the Storm Giant Librarian. Picture this. I gather everyone at the table before we start the session, and I make an announcement. Listen, we got a noise complaint last time, so here's the deal. There's now a 25-foot tall Storm Giant Librarian standing over my right shoulder. She's invisible, she's all-seeing, and she has one job: enforce silence. So if you get too loud, if you shout, or if you scream, or if you celebrate too enthusiastically, she's going to throw a massive tome at your head for 5 to 50 points of damage on a hit. And the librarian, she never misses. Now, you might be thinking, Patrick, that's a terrible idea. That's just going to make people more loud, because now they're going to argue about whether they were loud enough to deserve to be hit by the Storm Giant Librarian. You know what? You would be absolutely correct. But in the moment, I thought it was genius. We had a lot of fun that night. Players whispered their combat actions like they were in a heist movie. Someone actually got mad when they took 47 points of damage from a thrown encyclopedia for cheering too loud about a natural 20. And another player died. That tone packs a punch. It was ridiculous, it was chaotic, and it was one of the best sessions we had in months. And then, shortly thereafter, we got an eviction notice, delivered by the cops. So here's what I didn't know. The couple that lived next door to us, they were, let's call them concerned citizens. The kind of people who hear noise through the wall and immediately assume the worst. And what they heard through the wall with no context was this: a group of college-age men, intermittently silent, then suddenly shouting, then silent again. Occasionally someone would yell, "No!" or "You can't do that!" and then go quiet. And at one point, someone screamed, "The librarian got me!" And then there was a thud. Now, from their perspective, that sounds like a hostage situation, or a very weird cult, or perhaps both. So they called the cops. And the cops showed up, knocked on the door, very polite, very professional, asking, "Is everything okay in there?" And I, staying there in my D&D t-shirt, holding a 20-sided die, the battle map spread across the table behind me, had to explain. "Oh, no, officer. We're just playing Dungeons and Dragons. There's an imaginary Storm Giant Librarian. She throws books for damage. It's a house rule." The cop looked at me, looked at the table, looked at the players, all of whom were frozen mid-argument about whether 47 points of damage was fair for a thrown book. And then he said, very slowly, "Keep it down," and left. And we still got an eviction notice. So we had to apologize, which meant knocking on the neighbor's door and trying to explain that no, we were not running a criminal enterprise, we were not holding anyone hostage, and we were not in a cult. We were just playing a game with dice, and imaginary violence. And you know what? Once we actually met them, once they saw that we were just a bunch of nerds who got too loud about dragons, they were fine, embarrassed even, because they called the cops on a D&D club. And we promised we'd keep it down, and they promised to not assume that we were the worst of the worst. We all laughed about the Storm Giant Librarian, and after that, no more problems. But here's the thing that stuck with me. To us, inside the game, everything made perfect sense. The librarian was a funny house rule. The yelling was just excitement. And the silence was us trying to follow the rules. It was all obviously a game. But to someone outside, someone who didn't have the context, it sounded like chaos, or worse. And that's kind of the thing about D&D, isn't it? D&D exists in this weird space between reality and imagination. When you're at the table, you're in it. You're thinking about hit points and spell slots and whether the BBEG has legendary resistances. The game is real to you in a way that's hard to explain to people that don't play. But to everyone else, you're just a bunch of people sitting around the table, rolling dice and occasionally yelling about imaginary things. And sometimes those two realities collide in strange ways. Like when your neighbors think you're running a hostage situation, because you invented an invisible Storm Giant Librarian who enforces silence through violence. So here's what I learned from that night. D&D is loud. Not always, not every table. But when it's good, when people are invested, when the stakes feel real, when someone lands a clutch play that saves the party, it's loud. Because that's what happens when people care about something. What makes perfect sense inside the game can sound absolutely unhinged from outside. And if you're playing in a space where other people can hear you, apartments, dorm rooms, public spaces, you have to remember that they don't have the context. They just hear the yelling. So talk to your neighbors, seriously. If you're playing D&D in a shared living situation, just let people know. Hey, you play a tabletop game on Thursday nights. It might get a little loud. If it's ever too much, just stop by, knock on the door, and let me know. That conversation would have saved us from the cops, and the eviction notice, and the very awkward apology tour. Now, because at the end of the day, D&D is about having fun with people you care about, and that's worth protecting, even if it means retiring the Storm Giant Librarian. So, the Storm Giant Librarian, great house rule? Debatable. Effective at keeping the noise down? Absolutely not. Memorable? Oh, you better believe it. If you got a story about D&D bleeding into the real world, noise complaints, confused neighbors, cops showing up, whatever, drop it in the comments. I want to know that I'm not the only one who had to explain this game to someone who thought we were committing crimes. Now, it might get loud, but the tavern's still open. Pull up a chair and tell me all about it. Oh, and the librarian? She's still out there, watching, waiting, ready to throw a book at anyone who gets loud. Carpe diem.